Citizens of football land, welcome back to the Badlands feed. It's Buck the Trend. I'm your host, Dan Essian, coming to you with the episode this week. A little bit of a reaction to the Mike Williams signing and also just a little bit of Jets offense talk. So I kind of want to get into what the best case scenario is for them in terms of how they approach the rest of the offseason, especially at wide receiver, and also basically what it looks like, what success would look like with this team. And I think given some of the additions that they've made so far, and a little bit of a lot of what they can do later, particularly in the draft, I think that there's definitely some exciting direction that they can go in. I also think that it will rely heavily on everybody remaining healthy, but I think that's been the case every year. But I think, obviously, particularly this season, it's a little bit of like a historical tie-in in terms of health that is a little bit worrisome, but it's something that the Jets have to kind of get ahead of by adding as much depth in those areas as they possibly can. So, so we'll get into that a little bit. So obviously, again, the Mike Williams signing was this week. Of course, we had the Taylor ham breakfast sandwich situation, which was pretty awesome to kind of see where the team took that, and charitable donations that eventually came out of that, which was pretty cool. So, but I think in terms of the decision to sign him, the targeting of him, seems like they're pretty aggressive in their approach of him. I think a lot of that probably has to do with the schematic fit. And so I think that he's a really good compliment to Garrett Wilson. Obviously, tweeted that out, I think, after signing. A lot of people have said that as well. It's the physical complement, I think, that works really well. He's bigger, he's more physical. He's still a big play threat on top of that, though. I think that he's kind of the real version of what they hoped that they were getting with Allen Lazard, right? I think that Mike Williams is actually the real version of that, right? Big, he's a good blocker, a willing blocker. He can make plays down the field. He's going to box out DBs when the ball's in the air. He uses his body to position himself between the ball and the defender to make plays, right? Like, he's just so good at that, and he's been doing it for so long that you feel good about him doing that consistently on every down, and he just catches the ball. Like, doesn't have an issue with drops, right? He's somebody who's going to be consistent, somebody who's going to give you the expected output every single down, right? And it's just literally the opposite of what they got with Lazard. And so I think his presence will go a long way. I think that his match with Aaron Rodgers is ideal. I mentioned the combination of Aaron Rodgers, perfect back shoulder throws, and somebody who's a contested catch artist in Mike Williams. I think that together is going to go really well. I think you saw a lot of Justin Herbert taking advantage of that in the Chargers offense, and in the past you've seen that with Phillip Rivers as well. And we'll get into a little bit with Phillip Rivers talk in a few. But I think that's kind of where they match up really well, in that's how Aaron Rodgers likes to attack. He's very accurate down the sideline, one of the best sideline throw quarterbacks we've ever seen in terms of accuracy, in terms of placement. You combine that with somebody who can jump out of the gym, but also has such great body control. If you look at the draft guide, you see that acrobat trait. I think that's what Mike Williams has really well, right? He can contort his body in any place, in any way, to make a catch, right? And if you have somebody who's that as accurate as Rodgers is towards the sideline, he can fit the ball in between two defenders. He can fit the ball anywhere. He can put the ball in the perfect spot for Mike Williams to use his body to make a play. So I think that's where the matchup is perfect. But I also think that I feel like Mike Williams also be able to kind of teach Garrett and accentuate the skills that Garrett already has as well, right? Because like it's one thing, and this is what I've loved about the Jets having Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner together, is those battles have clearly made them both very good. As much as people like, oh, the iron sharpen irons thing is corny, it's actually real. Like there is very clear evidence to that. Every year, like throughout every single team, there's very clear evidence that when you match up, particularly growing talent, elite talent across from each other, and they get to battle and they get to share, trade secrets, and they get to understand each other's positions better, that they get like way better than they would be otherwise. And there's also evidence to the contrary that, when you're constantly facing somebody terrible, you're maybe not as prepared when things get real. But I think that that's where Mike Williams' presence will be even better for Garrett, in that you have somebody who's played the position for a really long time, extremely successfully, right? And somebody who, like, he does things that, Garrett hasn't, still needs to like improve on, right? He's obviously way more a physical receiver than Garrett. I think, Garrett has kind of a slender build, so he's usually not somebody who's going to like consistently put his body between the ball and the defender, right? But I think there's definitely little things that Mike Williams will be able to teach Garrett and mentor Garrett on. And I think that usually that stuff does go a long way, particularly if you're in a situation like the Jets are in right now, where I think the voices, particularly on the offensive staff, the main voices, maybe aren't as trusted. I think it's really good to have veteran players with experience that can lead players in the right direction, especially if they've kind of lost a little bit of trust with the coaching staff, right? I think that is honestly the type of environment that Saleh, even before things got, kind of rough last season, that's the type of environment that he has said that he wants, where the players kind of can police themselves sometimes and coach themselves sometimes. And I think that bringing in somebody like Mike Williams is a step in the right direction there. It will help keep people level headed as well. In that locker room, I don't think that Alan Lazard was the type of player that was going to do that. I think we kind of saw he kind of shelled and disappeared in those really tough moments. You definitely need somebody who's not really going to do that. And I think Mike Williams has literally been through the most difficult losses imaginable with the Chargers. So I think he'll be a good voice and a positive force in that locker room. And I think that the other side of that is the Phillip Rivers piece that I mentioned earlier. I think having played with somebody like Phillip Rivers for as long as he did, I think that one, and it could just be, honestly, it could have just been one season or two seasons. There's like a particular thing when you're playing with a player of that caliber, right? I think that one, the offense is basically that quarterback's offense, right? Like Phillip Rivers had full control of the offense. Phillip Rivers was calling things himself. Mike Williams understands what that's like, right? So it's going to be no surprise when he shows up and Aaron Rodgers is just calling the entire offense himself, right? That's what he's used to. He's experienced that before, right? He can deal with that. He can make it work. He can find ways to build chemistry with Aaron Rodgers in the same ways that he built that chemistry with Phillip Rivers. So I think that's also a positive, right? It's not going to be a scenario that he's not used to. It's not going to be a situation where he's walking in, he's like, "What in the world's going on? How come like there's too much freestyling going on? I don't know what to do. I don't know how to figure this out. Like I don't know what my quarterback's tendencies are. Like I'm confused." I think he'll know going in how he has to build that chemistry. He'll know going in a lot more than other receivers in terms of like, great, this is how things can change at the line. This is how we're going to read this defense. These are my options. It's going to be less, I think, obviously, just being a veteran receiver, it's going to take him less time to learn those things and pick those things up. And so, yeah, I think those are all like really like sneaky positives, but really important positives from that signing. But I think going forward with the wide receiver group, uh, behind Garrett and Mike Williams, they're still pretty thin, right? I think as fans, it's important to not overrate internal players. I think that happens a lot with Jets fans. Is the players that have good stories or the players that pop a little bit um, often get somewhat overrated, and it's hard to not do that sometimes just because you spend so much time watching the team, I suppose. But I think it's important here to realize that Garrett and Mike Williams are that that's it's basically them and a massive drop off, right? And so um, I think that as competitive as like Xavier Gipson and Jason Brownlee are, and I love their story and I love how they push the players around them. They should not be in wide receiver 3 territory on a serious NFL team. Um, and that's not like a slight to them. That's just purely based on the average talent level at that position across the NFL, right? They should be like maybe fighting for 4 or 5. Um, it should not be in 3 territory at all, right? So obviously the Jets need to continue to address that room, and I think that obviously Tyler Boyd has, it's been reported that that's an option there. The Jets might be a quote unquote dark horse in that um, situation. I think that's another great option. I also think that the draft is another opportunity, particularly if they're able to find a trade down partner and get back into the second round. There's going to be a lot of talent in that second round at wide receiver that the Jets can take a stab at, whether it's the Ricky Pearsalls, Lad McConkey's, or Jalen Polk, who's a big draft season favorite. I think that the Jets could really find an excellent third complement to Mike Williams and Garrett in round 2 potentially if they can find that trade down partner. I think in round 3 it gets a little bit murky because you got to wonder who's going to be available. I think a lot of the folks who are going to be available are decent, but like maybe not as good a fit as those second round wide receivers would be. So if they can find a way to get to that